I'm Jack Oswald, and you're listening.
This is Mr. Hammer, and you're listening to...
I'm Richard C. Hoagland, and you're listening to...
I'm Art Bell, and you're listening to Dr. J Radio Live.
We have an unidentified flying object.
Welcome back to another great episode of Dr. J Radio Live. I want to wish you all a happy Halloween as we literally are dead set in the middle of our week. Remember, folks, we are internationally syndicated, starting with late night in the Midlands in the United States, as well as the terrestrial stations, and in the UK, Deprogram Radio Network, as well as the stations in London, Leeds, and throughout the EU and UK. Now, as promised, we bring you another powerhouse 2-hour show with two different guests specifically for Halloween. And I want to remind you folks that Fridays we are now going to be doing Flashback Fridays. As a matter of fact, you'll be hearing this first guest very soon on Friday, since he was one of the handful of first interviews I did back in 2013. So if you guys are interested in what started it all, then you'll get to see or hear it for yourselves Fridays. That will be interchangeable with other pre-recordings. Now, the second guest that we're going to be talking to in about an hour, we're going to be talking about demonology with Dr. Bill Bean. But this first hour, as I mentioned, I have not had this guest on in over 5 years. I've been trying to get him back on, and now I know where he's been, so that makes it a lot better. If you're wondering who I'm talking about, well, you probably remember Lloyd Auerbach saying it yesterday when we talked about today's guest. And also, you might also remember when I said I love to talk to parapsychologists, and I told you I'm excited about today's show. Well, then that should give you the clue that I'm speaking to the one and only Dr. Barry Taff. Dr. Taff, welcome back.
Thanks a lot, Dr. J. It's wonderful to be here.
It's always a pleasure to speak to you and to see you like I did at the Zero event back in 2013. Let's go back to UCLA. You're getting your doctorate in psychophysiology with a minor in biomedical lab engineering. But in 1960, is it 68 or 69? You started working 69. You started working for the infamous UCLA parapsychology lab. Now, this lab doesn't exist anymore, does it?
Correct. The lab disappeared in 1978. It was removed from the Neuropsychiatric Institute for pretty much political reasons.
And that's something, Lloyd said yesterday, which is actually really sad to hear. There's not a single place in the United States schools that actually talk about or study this subject in depth, because we need more scientists involved, such as yourself. So what drew you to start? Were you contacted by the lab to start working in 68 or 69, or did you know that was a fit for what's been going on in your life and what you were studying?
Well, it's actually neither. I grew up having a lot of paranormal experiences, psychic experiences, telepathic, precognitive, out-of-body, clairvoyant, and I thought everyone could do this. And so I wrote a woman who was running the lab. I knew about a couple of years before I met her, Dr. Thelma Moss. So I wrote her a couple letters. There was no email or social media back then. I wrote her a couple letters. She never responded. Of course, she was probably deluged with lots of people wanting to talk to her. I called a few times, left my name with the switchboard. She never called back. So I gave up. And then one of the graduate students I knew when I was an undergraduate at the time, he was working with Dr. Moss. So she set up a meeting at her house in Beverly Hills, which is like 5 minutes from where I lived, and went over and saw her. And I knew who she was, but I didn't really know much about her other than her work in parapsychology. Well, so I sat down, and after talking to me, she said, "Can you do psychometry?" I said, "Yeah, I can do psychometry." So she gave me her keys, a keychain with all the keys, I guess, to her cars and the lab and her home and whatever. So the first thing I talked about a lot of different things. She gave me no feedback until I had the name of Shelley. I said a fat blonde woman, blue-eyed blonde woman named Shelley, and she's always screaming. Well, that was her best friend, Shelley Winters, the actress. It was an accurate, albeit unflattering description of her. But I talked about a lot of other things that were relevant. So that motivated Dr. Moss to bring me into the lab. And they did a study on me, which was published in the mid-'70s in behavioral neuropsychiatry. And it was a study of a psychic. And they thought they were doing just telepathy, but we ended up getting some precognition and clairvoyance mixed into it. Okay, so you're a psychic. People have had these experiences at the dawn of human civilization, and we don't know what's going on yet to a point. So they did a study on me, but at the same time, I was working in a lab as a research assistant, and I got into two different areas of work. One was in the lab itself in the UCLA's Neuropsychiatric Institute. I was wondering whether you could take normal, healthy, functional people who weren't in therapy or analysis or didn't have drug or alcohol problems, and could you train them to be psychic in the sense of a learning paradigm? And it's a simple thing. If you're doing a particular event, whatever it is, you're cooking, you're driving, you're singing, you're acting, and you get feedback really quickly to what you're doing right, what you're doing wrong, your performance will improve. That's called positive reinforcement. So I thought, let's try this in terms of ESP, what's now called remote viewing. So I was doing that in the lab. We ran thousands of these groups at UCLA. And there's an article on my website, barrytaff.net, called Learned Psi, Training to be Psychic. It goes into great depth on this. And we had much better results than I thought we'd have. We learned things we didn't expect to learn. The most important of which is people think of ESP like it's a biological radio, that you're sending out a wave or a field of energy, and people pick it up and they act upon it or they sense it.
Antenna is another word I hear, Dr. Taff. Antenna is a lot of people use ESP with.
Well, whatever you want to call it, the best way to describe it is this. The evidence that we came up with, as others have, academicians, is that the past information still exists, not the events. The information related to those events still exists. Now, and the information for remote events, meaning if you want to, do a remote viewing of someone in Russia or China or the Middle East, distance doesn't seem to interfere with it. But also, we've learned the most staggering and perhaps unnerving thing is that the information that makes up the future may already exist. Which then falls into the problem is, well, if the information about the events exists, how much free will do we have? And my first book, Aliens Above, Ghosts Below, discusses this, as do articles on my website. And it so unnerved some of our regulars, participants in this group, they walked out of it. It really shook them up that, well, wait a minute, we may not have any more control over our future than we have over our past. And that gives me a sense of peace. So that means you do the best you can and hope for the best, whatever it is you're doing. But in the end, it may be that the future and past are pretty much the same. And it's hard for people to understand. But let me put it this way. Here's a real good way. If someone gives you an 8x10 glossy, a headshot of somebody, you see the whole picture. If you cut it in little pieces, you get little pieces. However, if you're looking at a hologram, which is the 3D, a laser-induced 3D form of photography, and you cut the hologram into little pieces, each piece can recreate the whole, albeit with a lower resolution. The evidence suggests our brains work like this. Consciousness may work like this. And even more so, there may be an element of space-time that works like this. So what it comes down to is what we call phenomenon is determined by where it appears to come from, related to where we are in space and time when we perceive it. It's a little kind of like mind-boggling, but this is what the evidence suggests. And there's no form of energy known in the science of the world, different sciences, that can explain this very clearly. But it still occurs.
Our brains, most people state that we use just a small portion of them. In your investigations or your studies, were you able to determine that most people, in fact, do use a small portion, and some people, such as yourself, who are having these extra abilities, are tapping into a potential that most people don't use?
Well, I mean, if it's kind of a strange description. We only use a small percentage of our brain. It's somewhat of a misnomer. For every cell in our brain that fires, there are cells wrapped around it that don't. That's called lateral and surround inhibition. If all those cells fired at once, we'd have a massive seizure, we would die. But the whole thing is, what it comes down to is, I think the way we're designed neurochemically, the way our mind works, is perhaps the most relevant aspect of why psychic events transpire, the mental phenomena. There's good evidence that long-term memory is not stored in our brains, but stored in a remote zero-point power field. And the way we may be accessing our own memories is through this mechanism, which is in itself paranormal. So if this is the way we're designed to function, there's nothing paranormal. It's real. It's normal.
It's normal.
It's just
Yeah.
that the mechanics have not yet been explained.
Now, when did you start to theorize or really start paying attention to this theory? Because you sound more advanced and understanding than most people can even look at this topic. Because like you said, this is more normal as opposed to paranormal. And most people who don't really know the mechanics of the mind or what's really going on will just simply label this as paranormal.
You see, in science, there's two ways you collect data. One is in a lab setting where you can recreate this stuff all the time. And the other is where a phenomenon occurs under its own auspices, meaning you can't make it happen, you have to let it occur. And these research groups we have, the site training, they were over the course of at UCLA 8 years, and we did them privately for another 4 or 5. And the continuity, the consistency of the data was extraordinary. And let me give you an example. We got so tired of the regular ESP stuff, the real time. It was boring. So we tried to do a precognitive session. This was in, I think, 1977 or 78. So, it's a pitch black conference room. I mean, basically sensory deprivation. Couldn't see the hand in front of your face. We were in darkness. So we induced an altered state of consciousness through progressive muscular relaxation methods. So we describe the first randomly chosen target 1 week from tonight. And we don't know who would be there. We don't know who would be randomly selected. There's no way of knowing. So we described a tall, blue-eyed blonde woman, beautifully dressed like a model. We just saw a 3-story home in the Hollywood Hills. We saw a baby grand piano, a whole bunch of other things. And in our conference room we used for this work, there were 24 separate chairs, each of which had a number beneath them, which we didn't put there. But that's the way the setup was. So we saw this woman remotely from the future, which we saw her, what she was wearing. And then we saw a tall man around her, very tall, 6'4", all dressed in black shirt, black pants, black boots, black cape, black hat, black mask, and an imposing sword. And we thought we were losing our mind. What are we talking about? This is crap. A week later, new people come in who had never been there before, and each were given an opaque envelope with a piece of paper in there and a number assigned to it. We told people to sit down wherever they wanted to, except the seat idea where they controlled the remote to record the data. So, roll dice. We told every new person to open your packet and see whose number corresponds to the roll of the dice. Random, right? So this woman said, "It's me. And that's my number." Okay, we didn't know who she was. We never saw her before. We give her the control of the audio tapes, and we tell her, if anything you hear relates to you, directly or indirectly, stop the tape and comment on it. Okay, so the tape's running. She hears a description that's perfectly accurate as to what she looks like, even down to the clothes she was wearing. We rattled off one chair by number. She sat herself down in that of her own accord. The house in the Hollywood Hills, yep, that's where she grew up. The baby grand piano, yep. But it all could it be coincidence? But then the tall man in black with the sword and the cape, and she looked at me and she says, "How do you know who I am?" I go, "What?" She goes, "How do you know who I am?" I go, "What do you mean know who you are?" "I'm Tony Williams." I said, "That's really supposed to be someone? Who's Tony Williams?" So it was kind of weird. She said, "My father is Guy Williams. He played Zorro for Disney."
Ha! The tall black figure with the cape,
Yeah, right,
and the sword.
The cape and the sword. What the, huh? Something. And she said, "Wait a minute. When did you make this tape?" I said, "A week ago." She goes, "I didn't know I was coming here a couple of hours ago." What? I said, "Yes. What?" Made a lot of people really uncomfortable, and the chance of us seeing that was astronomical, 1 in a trillion maybe. So she was really unnerved, kind of freaked her out, and okay. But our group still kept working for quite some time, and we eventually said, "Let's do another precognitive session." So we did our thing, and all we kept hearing, and this is each person speaking into a mic. You can't hear what the people were saying. We described fire, fire, fire. Of course, there was no fire. The next day, I'm up in the lab, which is on the 5th floor. The conference room was on the bottom of the basement floor, where you walked into the NPI at. And your fire engines coming. The room we used caught fire. A electrical outlet behind one of the curtains or drapes sparked or shorted, and it caught the drapes on fire. No wonder why we saw that the night before. It was imminent.
Let me ask you a question about remote
Sure.
viewing. Can you enhance these abilities? Like, can other people learn them, or is it people like yourself who already have them?
It's the best way to describe it is, imagine we can all drive a car, okay, pretty much. But few people could be race drivers, like road racing, like Formula One or whatever, Le Mans, because it takes a certain level of hand-eye foot coordination, takes a level of stamina and endurance and musculature. Or any sport, you go play sports when you're in school, or with your friends, and you could play it, but you be a professional would be very different. So I suspect that everyone has it. My working with this area for a long time, I suspect the percentage of people that really have this, it's honed within them and naturally it developed of its own accord, it's probably 5 to 10% population at max. But again, if you supply positive feedback and reinforcement, it is possible to take people who weren't psychic and turn them into psychics. But there comes the problem. You take a blind person and you open their eyes, allow them to see. They see all this incredible beauty and light. They hear things, people talking, they see movies and TV. Wow, you're overwhelmed in a way if you've never seen it before. It's an amazing world. And we found that once people developed this ability to the point where it really could be used on their own behalf, they started having problems with it emotionally. It's sort of like waking up tomorrow and you're Superman or you're Wonder Woman or whatever. And the problem is, what do you do with it? How does it affect your friends and family and those people around you? I, for one, I've been having these experiences since I was a kid, and it's cost me a lot of friends. They kind of freaked out and decided I was a little too weird to be around. I'm always asked, ever been married? And my response is, are you kidding? It's a different world. Everyone has thresholds or a tolerance level beyond which point they don't want to deal with this because it's very, very unnerving. It's very, it makes people feel very insecure. So, to me, it's like, well, this is the way I am. And it's got me in a lot of trouble ever since I was a kid. And you remember when The Man of Steel came out in 2013.
Yes.
In the first act, where young Clark Kent is in school and his X-ray vision comes on. Well, that's pretty much exactly what happened to me, except I didn't run into a storage closet and heat the doorknob with heat vision. I just learned that I was able to see through people or into them the same way you could look through plastic or glass. And it got me in a lot of trouble at school. Friends kind of freaked out because I thought, hey, this is interesting. Well, it may be interesting, but it's a lot of people don't like their private things or elements brought to the surface.
That is actually something I've always argued, that if we had telepathic powers, or if we were able to access them, as many people talk about when they come in contact with extraterrestrials, the facade, the human facade is gone. Everything that people project to actually be, the emotions that they hide and actually put on this fake face just goes away because they're able to access our emotions and our brains directly. And I would think that's exactly what would happen here. And one other thing to add, Dr. Taff, is when you were a child and you were having these experiences that got you in trouble at school, this reminds me of those old x-ray glasses. You literally had x-ray vision but didn't need these $2 glasses from the back of comic books.
Yeah, but the example. Okay, I was 10 years old in the 5th grade, and at grammar school, in recess, playing something in the courtyard with whatever. And this little girl named Christine, blue-eyed blonde girl, was walking towards me, and I was looking at her, and suddenly I could see that under her blue dress with a little flower on it, there was on the right side there was a plastic bag, the tube going into her. Remember, I'm 10 years old. I didn't know what the word colostomy was or what it meant. So I went up to her and I said, "Chris, what's that bag in that tube?" And she started screaming and got the teacher, and the teacher dragged me in the principal's office. So he said, "Well, did you look under her dress or sneak in the girl's bathroom?" I said, "I did neither." "What are you talking about? How did you do it?" I said, "It's like x-ray vision." He goes, "All right, you're in a lot of trouble. I can kick you out of school," the whole bit. So I'm talking to him, and he's freaking out, thinking I'm just kind of a voyeur and I'm hiding out in girls' bathrooms, which I wasn't. I'm looking at him, and I said, "Well, you've got that, that scar, that purple scar where you had an appendectomy." And now I call it a keloid, but I didn't know the term back when I was 10 years old. And he turned purple and red and green and white, and he called my mother, and my mother said, "He can do that." And the principal went, "What?" So he could do this. "What do you mean he could do it?" My mom said, "I want to talk about it."
Wow.
Back in 1973, I met this girl in the lab named Carol, beautiful blue-eyed brunette. We got along real well. So we're dating at one point, So we're talking in her place once, and we're sitting on a couch, I'm facing her, and I said, "Oh, Carol, there's a tumor here in her left breast," and I pointed to it. She goes, "What?" "It's a tumor. Right here." I showed her what do you mean a tumor? "It's a tumor, but don't worry, it's benign." "How do you know?" "There's no calcium around it." "What do you mean you can see it?" Okay. So a few weeks later, she finished her degree at UCLA. She got a job, had to have an insurance medical workup for insurance purposes. So she goes there. They found a lump in her left breast where I said it would be. It was a tumor. It was benign. And she goes, I don't like this. I feel very uncomfortable around someone like it. It's like I feel like a piece of glass around you. But I helped you. She goes, "I don't want that help." Okay, and that pretty much was the death knell of that relationship. But I remember in 1999, a girl I dated in the 70s popped up out of the blue. She came over and she was babbling a lot of weird stuff about demonic aliens who were trying to destroy her and the world. I go, "Oh, okay, forget it." So we're outside. It's very warm. She's wearing a halter top. So, I was looking at her. I said, her name was Linda. I said, "Linda, what's all over your upper chest?" She goes, "What?" I go, "It looks like a jellyfish."
Oh.
What? I got closer to her. I said, "Oh, you better go see an oncologist. Have some mammograms. What? Your breasts are riddled with tumors." She goes, "What?" I go, "Go to an oncologist. Just have it done." So she did. It turned out she had to have a radical mastectomy. Both
Wow.
breasts were removed. I can turn it off. I can make it work when I want, but I can't turn it off. It's so bad where I met an old friend when The Dark Knight came out. We went to see it at a theater, and we met there. So, I've known this girl since the UCLA days. We're friends. And so the movie starts, and suddenly I'm getting a horrible burning, cramping, spasming in my bladder. Oh, my God, I almost buckled over. My friend got a call. She had to leave. Her daughter needed her, but she didn't need my help. So she left. I stayed. So I found out the next day that my friend, who had to leave, turned out had a really bad bladder infection.
Ouch.
And so you learn, ouch is right. When she left, I was fine. So, at what point, this has been with me my whole life. I can do it whenever I want to do it, but it doesn't pop on the way it used to. I could somewhat control it. But even my parents are freaked out. This is 25, 30 years, more than 30 years ago, 40 maybe. My mom comes to me, she says, Dad has, my father has a medical problem. If you can tell me what it is. I said, is it visibly discernible? And she said, no. So I sit down next to him, I did my thing. I said, you have a hiatal hernia. And I was right. My mom said, you guessed. I said, I only said one thing. I didn't say two things or five things or 10 things. I said one thing, and it was correct. And there's an article on my website called A Different Kind of Psychic, Being a Medical Intuitive. And it talks about my ongoing experiences, and part of that will be in my new book. But again, if you woke up tomorrow and had superhuman powers, would you tell everyone? Would you risk people thinking you're crazy, regardless of what they are, how they can be used? It sounds interesting, but most people don't like to be around that much weirdness because it makes them feel very unusual, very awkward. They want to run, sort of a fight or flight response. And it's so bad. Like 4 years ago, I met this girl online, never met her in person. Looked at her pictures. She looked like a young Joan Collins. She was absolutely gorgeous. So looking at her pictures, I was overwhelmed by a sense of pain. I thought, this woman's been sick most of her life, and she's about half my age. And so we finally talked. I said, look, I've got to ask you a question. I know we don't know each other, but you look like you've been ill a lot. She goes, yeah. She went through what it was. And whoa. So I said, I can't be around you. Why? I said, you'd kill me. And we've never met for that reason.
Physically kill you, right? Literally,
yeah,
physically.
I would feel her pain as if it's mine. And so I couldn't do it. It's the life I've grown up with. I mean, I met a lot of women. I was a girl. The only girl I could have married was I met 41 years ago on Valentine's Day, strangely enough. And we got together. We started dating. Long story. It's in my book and on my website. And what happened was everything was okay. I mean, literally, it was perfect. But then the dreams came, and then all the dreams said was, it was July 22nd, the relationship ended. The same thing over and over. I didn't tell her because obviously it could result in her believing I really wanted out of the relationship, but I was just covering it up. I didn't say a word to her. And make a long story short, everything was perfect. She lived in the Hollywood Hills, not far from the Hollywood Bowl. So July 22nd, we're there. Wake up together, and she's under the covers, and she's sobbing and crying. She says, why didn't you help me? I said, help you with what? When the room lit up. I go, what?
Oh.
Now, remember, I met this girl because she had poltergeist activity around her. That's the reason she called the lab. Anyway, she said the room lit up, and she was taken out of bed, floated up into a round metal room, and put on a cold metallic table, pedestal-like table. And these little guys in there with big black eyes and the gray skin and kind of reptilian skin, and she could hear them, but her mouth wasn't moving. And they had no outer ears, no nose, really, just a slit for a mouth. They were cutting and probing and everything, and she was bleeding. And anyway, and I said to her, she's still under the cover. I said to her, do you know anything about UFOs and UFO abduction? She goes, what? She said, what are you talking about? No. So finally, I coaxed her out from under the covers. It was pretty scary. One of the things she said while under the covers, another thing was that she'd been very tightly restrained at her neck, her abdomen, her wrists, and her ankles. So she gets up out of bed, and she had bruises all over her body. Bruises on her ankles and her wrists, her abdomen and neck, as if she'd been restrained very tightly for too long a period. Her bleed from every orifice of her body, but she wasn't menstruating. Her hair had been cut. Looked like someone took a little melon ball and took skin out of her back. and she went into shock, didn't believe in this. And what was really interesting about the case was what she claims to have happened, is how can you prove it? You can't. What preceded that the night before was poltergeist activity in her condo. Okay? Then days later, before the relationship ended, one of the neighbors said, "Did you see that weird thing hovering over here the other night?" And I said, "What thing?" Like a big reddish orange. They couldn't tell what it, and the power went out for a couple hours. So does this mean she was abducted? I don't know. But one thing I do know is that our potentially marriage-bound romance was interfered by an extraterrestrial wall. We hit that extraterrestrial wall. And she became really strange and became a religious zealot of a very unusual type. Now, whatever happened to her, had that not occurred, we would have been married within less than a year. But it did happen, and it didn't work. So, can I prove she was abducted? Nope. Can I disprove it? Nope. I mean, I don't, people tend to misrepresent things. They embellish and exaggerate, distort things for effect. But I do know that she had no interest in UFOs at all. So that was 41 years ago.
My question is now, since you're on this topic, and you're one of the only people that I know that have actually written a book on the topic, merging the two subjects, because I've always understood that anything within ghosts, poltergeists, extraterrestrials, cryptozoology is related. But you actually put it in a book, Aliens Above, Ghosts Below, which merges the two topics. Can you talk about, aside from this case, which looks like that way, but like you said, you can't prove it or disprove it, what other cases you worked on that you found to be both ghosts and poltergeists and extraterrestrials?
Right. Now, in the late 70s, I got a call from a man who was an executive at CBS television out here in Los Angeles, and met with him and his wife in their home somewhere in the San Fernando Valley. Beautiful place. Nice, normal people. They described the outbreak of poltergeist activity. They had no children around them. They weren't seizure-prone or epileptic. So I took a lot of notes. That was it. Sometime later, a few months later, they're driving north to take a vacation in San Francisco. They didn't want to fly. They were driving. So, nice car, brand new car. And they saw it looked like a plane about to crash, a glowing thing coming down. So they followed up to the canyon wherever they were, and they come around the bend, and there's this disc sitting on the ground, maybe 30 to 40 feet in diameter, maybe bigger, and these little guys walking around it in some weird suits and with the big heads and the gray eyes. Suddenly, the entities looked at them, and the aim looked like a tube that lit up, and this couple blacked out, and they found themselves driving on the freeway hours later. They have no idea what happened. They didn't remember. So what's interesting is whatever this was, it altered them. They both became really angry, kind of bitter, kind of resentful, almost dissociative in a way. They couldn't. My friend, the man who worked at CBS, couldn't work anymore, so he went to another station, and he was just too disheveled to work, and the wife was all messed up. So here we have a case that began as poltergeist activity and turned into an alleged abduction. They did remember some of it, but not all of it. Another case, it was over there in the 80s. It was a woman in eastern San Fernando Valley, and nice lady, beautiful home. So she's describing these weird figures running around, banging noises, blah, 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 things disappearing and reappearing, balls of large luminous anomalies. And so I said, well, when did this all start? She goes, well, it all started, I was taking a walk one night into the canyon near where she lives, and she came around the bend. There was a large disc sitting on the ground, and then she blacked out and found herself in the house a couple hours later.
Missing time.
Right. And then after that, there'd be big rolling balls of energy that would slam into the house and shake it. And it got so bad that her kids left. They were adults. They couldn't take being with it. It was too weird. And then the woman just disappeared. But her money was left behind. Her car was there. Her car keys. Everything was there except her. Okay, and then a case from the mid '80s. I remember. It was a girl, a UCLA student, and one night she wakes up and there are these beings on both sides of her, and she starts screaming, and the dog comes and barks at them, and the mother wakes up. Her father was out of town. Mother comes in and sees these little gray entities, and everyone freaked out, and they touched their belt area. They both lit up and disappeared. And then that's why they called me, and I thought, what's a one event? Sometime later, the same thing happened again, except her father was there as well. The father saw these things, the dog saw them. They were very interested in, she had snakes she kept in an aquarium, God knows why. But, yeah, they were interested in that. But, this is on my website, and it'll be in my new book. It's, okay, here's the basic thing, is the UFOs seem to employ a force that is beyond our comprehension. They can fly in a manner that we can't. They don't use aerodynamics as a mechanism to fly. In other words, they're not dependent on the air as we know it. There was a famous case in 1952, I believe, where there were overflights of Washington, D.C.
Oh, it was 52. Yeah. It was documented,
and
photographed.
It was on recurrent weekends. And they got up to speeds of over 9,000 miles per hour in the atmosphere without creating a sonic boom, which is, of course, impossible. My book talks about this relationship. So it appears that UFOs may employ the same forces as we call paranormal, meaning it's all operating in they can manipulate space and time in a way we yet cannot do. And the biggest problem with all of this, and this is in my first book and on my website, I've got a gut feeling that there's a faction of our government that knows what's been going on, and they're not going to disclose it for good reason. And strangely enough, I agree with them, because I've seen the way people react when you unload all the data on them, and it's clear that we, meaning the human beings, we may owe our existence to some form of genetic engineering that occurred long before humans walked the earth. We are the result of someone else doing gene splicing or genetic engineering, and we might not exist if not for them. And that would be one of the most disruptive pieces of information that could ever be given to the public. Oh, and by the way, we know this. We've had contact with these beings. They've given us some toys to play with, and we've let them abduct you. That wouldn't be good.
It wouldn't. Like you said, it would shake up civilization to its core, from religious beliefs to government. I don't think people would fall in line anymore to one of the things that was stated, at least with some government agents, is the fact that we would riot. And I could definitely see, like you said, when people have that overload of information and realizing in a split second everything they've been taught to believe is horse crap, I think that would really be awakening.
You see, the whole thing is this. Western culture exists on the concept, the premise of what's called domestic tranquility. And if that is disrupted by whatever means, if suddenly we disenfranchise, we have an unbelievable past unbelievable past and an unimaginable future, we are left in a place where, well, then who are we? If you go to church or synagogue or a mosque, or whatever, to worship your beliefs, and you realize that we aren't made in God's image, we're made in someone else's. You don't want to do anything to disrupt that domestic tranquility sense. It would be, come April 15th every year, people would stop writing their checks.
That's right.
They can't protect us. Why are we paying them money? So they can build more weapons they're going to kill each other with? I just have a funny feeling that the government knows what. I mean, look what happened 10 years before I was born. There was a War of the Worlds with that radio broadcast that
Orson Welles,
millions of people.
Yeah,
right? And that, believe it or not, we haven't changed much since then. We just have more technology, but we haven't changed as people. What would happen if a UFO crashed in Beverly Hills?
People would freak out. Yeah, they'd freak out.
It would be. They'd have to manifest some sort of. The government would have to make up a story to explain what happened.
That's what usually does happen with all the cases that have happened around. I mean, I'm sure you know about the Federal Firefighters Handbook talking about a scenario where there's a crash. That was modeled after a crash in Long Island in the 80s.
Yeah, apparently the government's had a lot of the faction of the government, I should say, has had protocol and methods that for dealing with these things. There was a case in 1974. It's a book called Mexico's Roswell. Great book. I forgot the author's name, but you could pick it up. So apparently, in 1974, a UFO was tracked coming down from orbit at very strange vectors at incredible speed. And it went through Mexico, went to Texas, Mexico, Texas, and it eventually crashed into a small private plane in Mexico. So Mexico was just going to dispatch military to recover the remains or if they were survivors. We contacted Mexico's authorities and we asked if they needed help, and they went, no, do not come across our border. So apparently there was a truck full of military men. They get there and they see the small private plane is destroyed. They see a disc on the ground, holes in it. They go up to it, and then they all get sick and they drop dead. Well, we sent a team of, recovery team, maybe called Blue Berets, UFO crash retrieval team down there with NBC suits, and they took the bodies of these Mexican military men in their vehicles and the plane, they put them together, and they detonated a suitcase nuke in 1974 to vaporize that. But they took the UFO back to the United States, and God only knows where it went to.
This was actually shown in History Channel's Mexico Roswell of the book of the same name. Dr. Wood's son was one of the commentators. And when I first, it was, I believe, the 60th anniversary of Roswell, 2007. I had only heard about what happened in Rendlesham, Roswell, and also what happened in Pennsylvania. But they had a series of shows that talked about Mexico's Roswell, Texas Roswell, the Aurora. And I didn't realize that there were so many. And then, of course, reading books like UFOs over California, UFOs over New York, every state is riddled with these cases. Have you dived into more of crash and retrievals? Have you found any more that happened in our area in Southern California?
I've never heard of crash retrieval occurring in Southern California. I mean, nothing I've run into.
There was a Needles case in 2008 that I do know about, and there was also the Battle of Los Angeles netted two craft, one in the San Bernardino Mountains and one in the ocean.
Right. And there was something in, the closest crash in California. Well, it was the Arizona Lights back in, was it
97?
90s?
Yeah, 97.
Right. The government goes to great measure to make sure people don't believe. And like I said, I have sympathy for their worry, because it would. I mean, when I was lecturing about this stuff, I used to teach parapsychology in different schools, and like not as an accredited course, but adult education. And invariably, one or more nights would be dedicated to ufology, and invariably, some people get really upset what I was talking about, and they went to the principal. We don't like what he's saying. It's this. I said, look, what would it do to our beliefs in theology? How would it affect everything? And it would possibly be the most disruptive information that could ever be given to humankind, ever. It could render us. It could start the Third World War.
Easy.
Yeah, and there's on my website, there's two little articles regarding evidence that surfaced strongly suggesting the real reason JFK might have been, he was assassinated, but the real reason was a lot more complicated and convoluted. Not long before he was assassinated, he was demanding that the CIA release the data on spaceships and spacemen that had been recovered. And he told them, if they don't do it, he will do it. And then he's dead.
Marilyn Monroe was supposedly killed for the same reason, because he shared that information with her, right?
That's what some evidence suggests. If this is real, if what we're just talking about here is real events, it's terrifying, because the powers that be, this faction, are willing to kill the most powerful man in the world to guard the most carefully guarded secret on Earth and kill the most famous blonde in the world. And, obviously we can't prove or disprove it, but for some reason, it sounds a little too convenient, because how many forms of conspiracies have come out regarding the JFK assassination? 10, 12, 100? And so the disinformation mechanism throws out all these red herrings, and we're focusing on everything except what the real evidence might be. And it's a little unnerving to think that this is the reason why JFK was assassinated. I don't know. It's just, when I first ran into this, it kind of made me sick to my stomach. And
for good reason.
That anyone who came forward with real information on this to expose it. And there's also disinformation. Look, that fake UFO alien autopsy thing back in the 90s.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It's obvious to me it was a hoax. And then years later, the same production company and the same network puts out another show showing that it was all a hoax. So
right,
did they know it? They just put it out there to make money? Or, we don't know. And that's the problem. But the one thing I can guarantee you is that there's a link between, UFOs and the paranormal. In ways that we probably can't really comprehend at this point. It would forever change the belief in ourselves, who we are, where we're from, where we're going. The most significant aspect or question for the human culture is, who are we, where we come from, and where are we going? And that might be have a different perspective thrown at it. It would not help humanity to make them think that we sold them out.
No, it absolutely wouldn't. Like we said, it would shake the foundation of humanity. Dr. Taff, we got a little over 5 minutes, and everybody listening, believe me, now that I reconnected with Dr. Taff, I will bring him back for 2 hours when he's able to do so and feels better. But for the spirit of Halloween, Dr. Taff, you've investigated over 4,000 cases of poltergeists, ghosts, and extraterrestrials. If you could settle on one story for Halloween to tell people, what would it be?
The most bizarre case was the Hollymont case. It's on my website. It's called, just look Hollymont on my website. You'll find an article. It's amazing. We went up there. Things were flying around, attacking people. Fires broke out. Machines would turn on and off. Phones thrown at people. A black sheet was wrapped around the chandelier. A news crew person from KTTV was chased out of the house by flying objects, and she ran down the Z-shaped stairwell in front of the house. A book flew over the house, flapping its pages, and made 3 90-degree turns, pursuing her down onto the street.
Was this it? What state or what country was this in? Hollywood?
Oh, this is Hollywood.
Hollywood.
Hollywood. The address is 6221 Hollymont. Holly, new word, MONT. It is one of the and it just happens to be sitting almost directly on top of the intersection of two active earthquake faults. And there's a shallow river under the house. And there have been 3 murders in there, and there was a body buried there illegally in 1922 that's never been exhumed. So it has all the elements. We were there last in 2008. And it simmered down. Not much happened when we were there, except we picked up my Pelican case we were leaving when I put my instruments in. And something had carved a lazy R into the bottom of the Pelican case. Those things are basically bulletproof. So you would have to take a chisel and a hammer, be whacking away to do it. It was all smooth. And then I remembered the body under the house, the tombstone read Regina. A little bizarre. The house has been renovated. It's up for sale. It's a ridiculous amount of money. It's been renovated, but they try to make it look modern on the inside. I don't like that look because it doesn't fit the outside of the house. But that could be one of the most haunted locations I've ever investigated, other than Cielo Drive. And to end real quickly is I went to the Cielo Drive case in 2005 and 6, 21 times. I got sick there 19 times, and I go to the hospital. So my body was telling me stay away. The geomagnetic field was anywhere from 12 to 60 times its normal amplitude, and things flying around, luminous anomalies, the whole bit. And there's 2 articles on my website about
Now,
Cielo
over
Drive.
what period did you go to Cielo Drive over the 19 times? Over how many months or years?
2000, summer 2005 to summer 2006.
19 times in literally 12 months, or 12
Well,
to
actually
14.
21 times, but 19 times I got sick. I had to go to the ER, and my body's telling me it doesn't like it there, so I stopped going.
For good reason, yeah.
I kept track of a lot of the people coming and going, strangers to me, and they came in with no pre-existing conditions, and almost 68% of them became ill when they were there.
That and I would think that if you follow up with the current residents, I would think these still happen on Cielo and Hollymont as well, because of the fact that that's the location. And I think that's something people need to recognize, is that sometimes these activities happen at a location, not necessarily to a person. So if the person moves, it's still going to happen at that location.
Right. Yeah. It's like I said, my book talks about this. My website talks about this. We do know there has to be a link between the environment and the person. The individual has to be sensitive to electromagnetic fields. They either, and also possibly seizure prone or epileptic, and if that's the case, it's called inductive resonance coupling that links the people to the environment. They act as the laser in a DVD player. Oh, look, something's happening. But most people, nothing happens when they're there. But if you're one of the few that makes it happen, it could be quite impressive.
Impressive and detrimental for someone like you for your health, but at the same time, it varies, I guess. Well, Dr. Taff, like I said, we definitely will have you back for a 2-hour interview, but since we got a couple of minutes left, let's talk about your website, your upcoming book, which I know you can't talk about the title, where people can buy your previous books, for instance, Aliens Above, Ghosts Below, which I have, and I think it's a fantastic book for everyone listening.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. J. The Aliens Above, Ghosts Below. Okay, my website is barrytaff.net. That's one word, barrytaff.net. You'll find a lot of articles, things that aren't in my book. The new book I can't go into any real information on because I have to keep it private at this point. But my gut feeling is that it's going to create a lot of controversy. It's going to upset a lot of people because I'm digging into things that people don't normally deal with at this level. And it's going to tell a rather strange story of what happens to a person if you dedicate your life to this at the academic level and how that affects your existence. So it's going to, I haven't finished it yet because I started developing eye problems again. I've already had 2 surgeries. I need a third one. So I've got to, once that's done, I can write again, but it's real hard for me to read stuff on the computer right now. My eyes go nuts.
Well, we do wish you well, and you've had 18 months where you've had several surgeries, and we wish you a speedy recovery on that as well. We almost lost you, and we're glad you're still with us.
Thanks a lot, Dr. J. I appreciate it.
Well, again, I would thank you off air, but because we have a second guest, I have to thank you on air, and I will be in touch with you. Everybody stay tuned. When we get back, we're going to move into demonology with Mr. Bill Bean. I guess with that being said, it is time for our break. Once again, Dr. Taff, I do want to thank you. And like I said, I do wish you a speedy recovery. Everybody out there, please check out barrytaff.net. His link is also on the bio on my site. And check out his books. Like I said, I definitely highly recommend Aliens Above, Ghosts Below. We'll be right back.